From the RSNA, this is the Radiology Artificial Intelligence Podcast. My name is Paul Yee, and I'm a radiologist and co-host of the podcast.
And my name is Ali Tijani, and I'm a radiologist and co-host of the podcast. Each month, we dive into the hottest topics in radiology AI and talk with leading experts, thought leaders, and movers and shakers in the field.
Hi, my name is Alkhulaifat. I'm a member of the trainee editorial board of the Radiology Artificial Intelligence Journal, and I'm also one of the assistant editors of the Radiology Artificial Intelligence podcast. Ali and Paul graciously let me lead the session today about mentorship and how we can build the next generation of informatics leaders in radiology. And it is my absolute pleasure to introduce today's guests, Dr. Tessa Cook and Satvik Tripathi. Dr. Cook is an associate professor of radiology at the Perelman School of Medicine at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia and vice chair of practice transformation in the Department of Radiology. She's an active member of multiple radiology societies, including the RSNA, ACR, the Society for Imaging Informatics in Medicine, and the Association of Academic Radiology. She is the director of Imaging Informatics Fellowship and modality chief of 3D and Advanced Imaging. In 2020, she was inducted to the College of SIM Fellows and received SIM's Dr. Ruth Dayoff Award for the advancement of women in medical imaging informatics. Dr. Cook was the chair of the Society for Imaging Informatics in Medicine from 2022 to 2024. She became a fellow of the AAR and a fellow of the ACR in 2025. She pursues innovative methods to enhance care delivery in radiology and improve radiologist workflow. Satvik is an undergraduate researcher at the Department of Radiology, Perelman School of Medicine, and a visiting student researcher at Harvard Medical School, Mass General Hospital. He's an AI scientist for RadAid International, where he leads global health initiatives in imaging AI and informatics. He's actively involved in SIM, serving as vice chair of the membership committee and member of the Global Outreach Committee. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you, Nana, for having us today.
Yeah, of course. And today's session is really important because it's fascinating that radiology is one of the most technologically advanced fields in medicine. But despite that, it's still surprisingly under the radar for a lot of computing and engineering students. So Tessa, I've been wondering what your perspective, why do you think this gap exists between radiology and students from tech-heavy backgrounds?
It's a great question, and it's a real problem that we have, especially now with AI permeating so much of radiology practice. We know that multidisciplinary teams are the most successful, and yet we are struggling to get early career folks from engineering and data science to come and help us solve medical problems. And I think part of that is awareness, right? It's not a specialty that is an avenue, I guess, that's presented when these folks are in their phases of education, trying to figure out what their job trajectories might be. From a purely practical standpoint, healthcare just doesn't pay quite the same way as large industries, large non-healthcare industries. So that can be a challenge sometimes. But I think the biggest part of it really is just a lack of awareness. And I remember I was an engineer by training. And, even as a biomedical engineer, the pathways were really into sort of device development, mechanisms, novel mechanisms for drug delivery, electrical engineering. AI was hardly the big hot thing that it is now a couple of decades ago. But you got into healthcare in other ways. And I think we still have that challenge now that we're not really out there and engaging with folks that are early in their careers, still in training, and saying, hey, we have really cool problems that are just begging for solutions, and you all have the talents to produce those solutions.
And I guess building on top of that, what do you think are some effective ways that we can introduce radiology and imaging informatics to them, perhaps even before they consider a career in medicine?
I think we need to be really proactive. My elementary school age child has STEM night, and they run around the school and they see all the different possible careers in their future and the things that a variety of the folks whose kids go to those schools do. And I don't know what happens after the elementary school level, right? Does STEM night continue into middle school? Does it continue into high school? It sure as heck doesn't continue into college. I think it's really just a missed opportunity, right? We need to get FaceTime with these folks and say, this is an amazing career. You don't have to go to medical school if you don't want to, if that's not something that's of interest. But if you like solving cool problems, we have a ton of cool problems. And the skills that you have, even though they might seem far afield of medicine, are really not. I mean, these are exactly the skills that we need in medicine, in radiology, and we just need to do a better job of marketing ourselves, for lack of a better word, as a profession, as a specialty, and finding folks that find these problems interesting and want to help us solve them.
Yeah, and let's say we do manage to capture the interest of computing and engineering students. And Satvik, I think that as someone who's been involved in informatics early on in your career as an undergraduate student, you can give us your perspective on this. What kind of programs or opportunities, whether they're academic or extracurricular, do you think can really help them get hands on exposure to imaging informatics and clinical AI?
I think I would love if we had more STEM nights in college or even high school. But a few of the things we could do, and most universities are sort of moving towards, is having more dedicated coursework in either medical imaging AI or just biotechnology as a field, and having these courses housed within the School of Engineering and or the School of Computing, which are more tailored towards students who are under the track of informatics or computing or any engineering field. But this gives them a more focused real world application. Then a lot of the opportunities also come from the university based research labs, where they can bring together college students or high school students even, and they can even bring them to the radiology department. That's how I first got introduced to radiology. And they can work on real world, medical imaging data sets. And the best part is this doesn't has to be, at all times like PHI data. You can work on open source data, which is freely available, and you can play around with it and learn a lot of the basics of imaging, informatics, and so on.
I'm curious to see if you've seen any success stories in the real world of programs that have managed to provide this early exposure.
I'll give you some personal story here. I was first joined in my sophomore year of high school. I did a summer school at Stanford, housed between the AMI lab, which is the AI and medical imaging lab, and then between the School of Engineering and the computer science department. And I learned about AI, and we had our first lecture, Dr. Kurt Langlotz, and that was my first ever introduction to that AI could be applied to radiology. And it was mind blowing to me that we've been learning about how AI can help classify cats and dogs. The same AI model can help in the detection of tuberculosis and pneumonia. And then I have been a part of the Harvard Department of Biomedical Informatics summer fellowship program, which gave me a next level understanding of more real world healthcare data sets and working with real world clinical problems. And then there have been a lot of these such programs, and there are high school summer program, there's summer scholar program for college students. And each of these programs are run by graduate students and a lot of time medical students. And they give really good overview of what the field looks like, and also giving them real life examples of what a career trajectory might look like if you end up pursuing either a PhD degree or MD PhD degree or just stay on the industry side of things.
In both of your opinions, how do you think we can scale these efforts? I mean, it shouldn't fall only on the universities. I think people in the industry should also be involved in encouraging early career undergraduate students to be more involved in these career paths. I'm curious to know what you think.
It's a tricky question, because we've thought of this in multiple professional societies that I volunteer with over the years, and half jokingly, but perhaps not half jokingly, saying, hey, we should go to STEM night at the elementary school and, talk about this as a specialty, as a profession. I think it is an opportunity for our professional societies. I know that the RSNA has ever increasing medical student contingent that's in attendance that is very active, and I think that's fantastic. I was just at the ACR annual meeting last week and spoke to the medical student section there. And it was phenomenal to look out at a room of, 100 and some medical students thinking about careers in radiology. I know that SIM has the members in training, but again, these are all folks who have sort of declared an interest in medicine already, right? How do we replicate this for the cohort of people in early in their careers or still trying to figure out what their careers are that have not declared an interest in medicine, that don't even know that medicine is a viable pathway? And I think it takes a lot of outreach. I think it takes deliberate outreach. It is hard to scale human effort, but I think this is where collectively our professional societies can really all get together and make this happen.
I think a big part of that comes from identifying a mentor that you've worked with who is interested in this field and being able to see what that practice looks like, in the future. I guess a lot of the hesitation from undergraduate students is that they don't really know what it looks like to have a career in informatics and, maybe outside of medicine, what that could look like. So that sort of transitions us into talking about mentorship, and both of you have great perspectives on what a mentor-mentee relationship looks like from two different views. How important do you think mentorship is in guiding these students into this field?
I've been very, very fortunate to have really amazing mentors. And I think that has been a big pushing for me to be more and more involved in the field and learn more every single day, including Dr. Cook and Dr. Danya Day and Dr. Farouk Dakwa. And there are numerous other people who have helped me through my journey. But having a good mentor is like having a good book where you can literally learn everything that you have about the field, but then also explaining it in a way that you understand. Like if you keep putting knowledge on the person who does not know much about the field, the person is going to get burdened and then slowly be less and less interested in what could be a very interesting field. It's all about how much effort a mentor is willing to put to explain and teach concepts and then get to the level of mentee and then just try to benefit them as much as they can. It's a very important thing to have because they might look so hard to go into or they might be so confusing, but having a good mentor can really help you simplify a lot of these things and make the trajectory a lot easier.
I can't overstate the value of my mentors when I first got into imaging informatics. Different pathway, admittedly, because I was already, a radiology resident at that point. But I was incredibly fortunate to start my residency at a time when four of the biggest names in imaging informatics were all here as Penn faculty: Bill Boone, Woojin Kim, Kurt Langlotz, and Steve Horry. And to have that environment to learn and grow was, I didn't realize it at the time, but I have realized it since then, that having people model your future career for you, even if you may not at the time realize that it is your future career, is so incredibly valuable. And part of it is just thinking, oh, this is a path. This is a job I could do. I could structure my day or my week, I guess, where some of my time is clinical and some of my time is solving problems and fixing things and coming up with cool new stuff. And a big part of the value is in forming connections, creating networks across the community in which you are going to work in the future. And so, for Satvik and I, imaging informatics, for example, and meeting other leaders in the field or folks that have since become other leaders in the field when we were all very early in our training, and having those networks and having those connections, and now in turn being able to create those networks and connections for my mentees. And it really is what makes the world continue to turn in some ways. And it is absolutely critical.
Tessa, being your mentee as well, like I see a lot of the presence that you give in our meetings and being able to follow up on things and like just providing that level of support to your mentees. I'm curious to know, how does it look from the other end? How does a mentor become able to provide that support to their mentee? And how difficult is it to be able to maintain several of these relationships?
Yeah, I mean, Donna, you guys both know I drop the ball sometimes, more than I'd like to admit, but it takes a deliberate effort. I think the most successful mentor-mentee relationships are the ones where you hold each other accountable. I think that's probably true of all relationships in our lives, personal and professional, is that it can't just be one sided. The mentee has to hold up their end of the bargain, but really so does the mentor. And, I have definitely had instances where I have not been a good mentor because I've been too in the weeds or too busy and not been able to provide the guidance and the feedback that a mentee has needed. And so it really just it takes deliberate effort. Certainly not something I learned by someone telling me how to do it, right? I learned this by people modeling it for me, both the positive and the negative. You have to work at maintaining the relationship and meeting the expectations. And I think that's also another thing that's it's important to realize is that every mentor has a different style and has different expectations. And so there are some mentee mentor pairs that are a good fit, and there are some that are not an ideal fit. And so sometimes it just takes a little work to find a mentor that fits your style, and as a mentor to find a mentee that fits your style and is willing to your expectations, and you're willing to provide the guidance and the mentorship and sometimes the feedback that they don't necessarily want to hear, because I've definitely been on the receiving end of that from some of my mentors. There's that like tough love element in there a little bit sometimes. But it really has to be bi-directional because otherwise it's not going to succeed.
Satvik, given that you've been receiving mentorship from different people in different disciplines, and how do you sort of categorize those relationships and how do you benefit differently from each one?
I think I have been very fortunate to have a very broad span of mentors from a very early stage, from very different institutions. But every single person that I've interacted with, I have learned a lot because both academic or just talking about how to just manage your time. A lot of this is like a domino effect, right? You learn one thing, then you hop to the other, then something else happened, and then you keep learning different things. And each of these people and these mentors you meet, they guide you in various ways in life. A lot of people have taught me, including Tessa and including Danya, have taught me how to just manage time and just sometimes just saying no. If you don't have the capacity of doing things, just say no. Just focus on good work you're doing. And then I have learned a lot about just pack system from Amina, who has taught me everything about HL7 to packs and how things are being deployed. So various mentors have given me various amount of different knowledge from both clinical side to research side. And I think it's very important to just accept these feedbacks and try to learn as much as you can. A lot of times it might, as Tessa said, might not be a good fit. And I personally have had mentors where I felt are not good fit, but still in those situations I've learned a lot. And then I've learned a lot when potentially maybe if I run a lab of my own, what I could do better. So yeah, there's a lot of learning with every person you meet in the field because it's so ever evolving.
I mean, my personal story is that prior to starting my postdoc research fellowship, I was not really familiar with imaging informatics as a field. And through learning from several mentors, including Dr. Satardi, who was the person I started working with and who taught me a lot about the field, I think being curious and inquisitive, having someone who was able to provide you with the resources and how they were able to be involved in imaging informatics and provide what sort of resources that they had used to learn more about it. And I think SIM has a lot of great resources. And I know, Tessa, you're well aware and maybe can shed some more light on which resources are available for trainees who are really interested in informatics from all sorts of different backgrounds.
We're fortunate, right? There are a lot of great resources in the informatics community, small as it is. And it's been really phenomenal to see the SIM members and training community um, grow and blossom as it has in the last few years with phenomenal leaders and the programs that they're putting together, whether it's at the annual meeting, whether it's online through the SIM website now, and with all of the new digital infrastructure. There's so much education and so many networking opportunities that are available. Even at our other kind of big informatics societies that I consider sort of RSNA and SIM and ACR, all with a significant informatics presence, that part of the opportunity really is the networking piece. And part of it is just resources that are available to members in training to be able to learn and grow in the field. Because that's one thing that I feel like a lot of people ask me about at meetings is, how do I get involved? How do I learn more? And there is so much happening right now. And there are so many potential resources. And let's be honest, ChatGPT will tell you anything you want to know. Whether or not it's accurate, that's a little bit of a different story. And so to have vetted sources of content, I think is really important. And our major informatics organizations are great for that, and particularly at the trainee level.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for your time today. This has been a great conversation.
Thanks so much, Donna.
Thank you.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Radiology Artificial Intelligence Podcast. Shout out to Yuri Ishimchisen for our podcast music and to the RSNA podcast staff.
Email us at podcasts@rsna.org anytime with questions, feedback, or suggestions.